Yes, it started. Great. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We are so excited to see so many people being interested in spending their Thursday afternoon listening to a talk series on Beyond Degrowth. I'm JP. I'm from Mexico City, Mexico, and I'm currently based in Paris, France. And I'm going to quickly just introduce the IDN, and then I'll pass on the word to Aya. So this talk series, this is the third one with Emilia Reyes, is hosted by the IDN, which is the International Degrowth Network, which is a collective of organizations, activists, researchers, artists, practitioners committed to promoting and strategizing for degrowth. The IDN was established only 6 months ago, and it focuses on international cooperation, diverse narratives, community building, and increasing public awareness, as well as implementing degrowth strategies, policies, and practices. We're organized into many different circles, one of them being the Global South Working Group Circle. And I'll let my colleague, Aya, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Happy to see all of you here. No, sorry, my voice is a bit sick today. So my name is Aya. I'm from Egypt and Palestine, and I'm also part of the Global South Working Group. So the Global South Working Group's mission within the IDN is centered on being a bridge between the degrowth movement and Global South, and building essentially like true allyship. And we noticed, like from our own experiences, that people from our communities are quite apprehensive and hold reservations when it comes to degrowths. And so we were like, why so? And from this idea, we're like, okay, maybe we need to go beyond degrowth, and we need to kind of push the boundaries and the themes within degrowth and really look at its blind spots and engage in questions of how can we find solutions that are centering the realities of the Global South or the global majority. So we're very excited to have everyone here. And without further ado, I'll let JP introduce our speaker.
And just so folks know, because Comrade Aya is a little sick, I will be doing a bit more of the talking than usual, which is very sad. I'd love to hear more from Aya, but we would like her to recover sooner rather than later. So we are super honored and excited to have with us Emilia Reyes. Emilia Reyes is the program director of policies and budget for equality and sustainable development at Equidad de Género, Ciudadanía, Trabajo y Familia, which is gender equity, citizenship, work, and family. She coordinates the Campaign of Campaigns, promoting an initiative that promotes cross-movement mobilization around macroeconomic and environmental issues, and is a co-convener of the Women's Working Group on Financing for Development. Emilia is also a contributing author in the segment Gender, Climate Justice, and Transformative Pathways of the IPCC report Climate Change 2022 Impacts, Adaptation, and Vulnerability. And for 5 years, Emilia was also an organizing partner of the Women's Major Group for the 2030 Agenda. I cannot tell you how much of an honor it is to have Emilia here, especially given that she's a friend of mine. We will be giving the word to Emilia to start us off and sharing with us her unfiltered thoughts. And afterwards, I have some questions prepared for Emilia to get the conversation going. And then it's a free-for-all where all of you can ask your questions to Emilia. Yeah, so the floor is all yours, Emilia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, JP and Aya. And it's an honor to be here with you. You don't want my unfiltered thoughts. I am very impertinent as it is with the world's filters already. So, but anyway, I'll try. I'm very excited about this chat because as I've been thinking about coming here, I realized that everybody has their own definition of degrowth. And this is maybe where people is confused about, is it applicable to the global north, the global south at all? So I find it very interesting. So I'm gonna not necessarily give you my definition, but I want to share with you how it is in my methodological framing, how I I position degrowth within a global framing. As JP said, I'm an activist. I'm an advocate and an activist for global justice. That means that I have the most informal role of being an activist in many spaces, in trying to mobilize with different social movements, trying to make connections, engage with them also in their utmost concerns, from mostly at the macro level, but we're trying to reclaim the demands from the ground up. But also an advocate, meaning I try to bring those demands into official spaces like the UN, in many processes such as the climate change negotiations or the financing for development, and also trying to monitor illegitimate spaces of power such as the G7, the G20, and very much to my pain, we're also monitoring from the outside the harm that the IFIs, especially the World Bank and the IMF, are doing globally, especially to the global south. So it's a combination of work as an activist and an advocate. Meeting in the middle is really trying to bring the voice of social movements and facilitating their own voices into these spaces. So I ran into Degrowth some years ago, and I thought it was very exciting because this is a framework that comes from the global north to really account for their historical responsibilities. And this is one of the most positive element that I would say from the Degrowth framework. And it is very much to praise and to cherish and value. And I think this is, even if only for this, it has a place in the world. It's extremely important to keep on promoting it in the spaces of Global North colleagues, because it is about time. We've had a lot of reflections from the Global South from many angles, especially highlighting colonialism, imperialism, and the imposition of austerity measures, the unequal exchange, etc., from many voices from all of the regions. And this is a framework that, for the first time, coming from the Global North, and being accountable to what the harm that it has done, I think it is extremely important. And also very much centering the historical responsibility and the need to take into action. So this is very commendable. And I also want to say other positive things about the framing of Degrowth. The second is that it really highlights the planetary boundaries framing, whereas usually we hear people only talking about the climate emergency. The Degrowth movement has taken it to heart to speak in a comprehensive manner of the planetary boundaries. That also means that there are several limits that have been already surpassed. And it's for some scientists, it's only 6, for others 7. But even then, out of 9, it is really a dire moment for humanity. And we need to be as comprehensive as possible. So the Degrowth movement, by emphasizing not only the climate emergency, but really the sophisticated and complex system of the ecological integrity framing as a whole, and the way we engage with it, I think it's extremely valuable. I also want to say that framing growthism as a cultural phenomena in humanity starting from the past century is extremely important, because it also demythifies a lot of what is given as a natural law of economy that we can't seem to grasp at when it started, and now we know that it's a cultural bias. And this is really important to highlight, because then it allows us to engage not only with economic discipline, but also with the points of entry of economy that are harmful to humanity, whereas we can still try to grapple with macro analysis that are really going to help us shift towards a positive dimension. So this is what I really think is extremely important from the Degrowth framework. Now, I also think that Degrowth, as it is, should be applied to the global north, to concentration of wealth in the global north and the global south, and to harmful sectors such as, well, fossil fuels, but also the retail sector, the jets and the luxury items, etc. So it's very clear what are the harmful sectors. and both in the global north and in the south. So all of those elements need to degrow. And I think there is a consensus there. And I won't go into the myths of people who are criticizing degrowth just for the sake of it, and they don't like the word, or they think that all growth should be looked at in a specific manner on each of the points of entry. I don't think it's useful to go into that. If you know that degrowth is a framework, you need to spend some time studying it, reading about it, making yourself acquainted with the different traditions of degrowth. I think it would be really useful. I also want to highlight that from what I gather, degrowth has mostly focused at the community level, the local level, and some proposals at the mezzo level, the institutional level, which are very valuable. And there are even very much at the institutional level, there are experiences that are extremely valuable that are trying also to reach out some territories, as well as the decision makers there, to try to institutionalize and systematize the actions. So it is very important. What I find lacking is the macro point of entry. And that is where it is kind of, it's kind of weird, because when you start on degrowth, you start with the macro analysis of the global north's responsibility of the harm of the planetary boundaries. And then when you see the proposals, it's all at the territorial level and at the institutional level. So the macro element is missing. And what am I referring to the macro? For instance, when degrowth is mapping, for instance, the chain of value from the moment where you go in to find the resource, and we know our information, the global north is responsible for 72% of excess use of the resource materials in the world. 50% of them are in the global south. So we know where is it coming from, and from then on, we know where is the value chain going, from the cheap labor from the south, and those resources that are also considered cheap from the south, and then transform and produce in the global north to go back to be sold. And also the final part that degrowth also very much emphasizes, which is the discarding of the materials that also remains in the global south. So what degrowth misses to map is the political and the relational dimensions, meaning on the one hand, it has emphasized, thanks to some feminists, that there is a social reproductive dimension, but the degrowth just mention is passing by and not making a lot of emphasis on that. And whenever they make suggestions of policies on time use, etc., they take for granted that the sexual division of labor will be erased somehow in this illusional, utopic degrowth world, and it won't if we don't tackle it. So that's a question that we need still to address. The other issue is, of course, the way in which the role of indigenous peoples in all of this, because they are 6% of the population and they uphold 80% of the global biodiversity. That it's a macro agenda that the degrowth movement has not tackled. And there are indigenous peoples in the global north which are engaged in totally different analysis, and I don't see that there is this connection. But the other part of the relational dimensions I wanted to mention, and the political, is, for instance, the trade agreements. So for the growthers in the global north, it seems that then it's as if they wanted to think, okay, then I'm going to produce my own stuff and I'm going to consume my own stuff so that I don't touch the global south's materials. But then the trade agreements are still there. And the trade agreements are not only happening at the WTO, but also happening bilaterally, which is in a way more harmful than those that happen in the WTO, if that is possible, because the world is really disgusting. So these bilateral agreements are happening, and then there is no relationship with the citizens, with the movement of degrowth, in how are we going to stop and tackle those trade agreements, because those are precisely happening, promoting the unequal exchange. So it's not like, oh, I'm pure, I'm not eating what is coming from those trade agreements. Those trade agreements are there, imposing privatization in the global south, imposing this unequal exchange, and even the discarding of the materials. And it is as the degrowth movement wants to be pure and saved, not tainted by those processes. And therefore, they remain unawares, they remain uninvolved. And so all of those policies happen with decision makers in the global north. So I think that's where the degrowth movements, they feel a very strong affiliation for the academy, for the global north, but they don't assume themselves as citizens. And therefore, the power of the citizenship as action, for instance, in engaging with decision makers, not only on the, as I was just mentioning, the WTO, but it can also be in the role that governments happen in the position of the governments in the IFIs, in the World Bank, the IMF, or the Paris Club with the debtors discussion, with the lenders and the creditors, taking in an appalling role in deciding the fate of countries in the global south. And so those are just informal spaces of power, right? But I'm also saying the G20, the G7, if all of you have the information that you have, why are you retreating to your communities to just bake your sourdough bread and nourishing your own tomatoes while you know the extent of the harm? The degrowth community is the most informed in the global north. So why are you stopping and retrenching yourselves in community life, creating a new, let me say, I'm saying I'm not unfiltered, but I'm very impertinent as it is, creating a new wave of conservative leftist movement. In my own communities, I'm going to be living and I'm going to do a lot of reproductive work and stuff, but the world is still burning, especially for the global south, with all the understanding that the degrowth community has with the larger extent of all of these processes. So that's why I find appalling. And if you see, I'm not saying that degrowth needs to come to the global south. Just the action of the growthers in the global north with the responsibility of the processes that start in the global north and end up in the global north, that should be very important. And the other end is, it's very strange that the degrowth community is not engaged in the discussion of fascism, because we have our share of fascists, but in the global south, but just one fascist in the global north makes a huge impact globally. So precisely with all the understanding on engaging with communities, it is also very strange to me that there is no engagement on anti-fascist work, not necessarily Antifa, going out and to the streets and strike, but reclaiming the social bond to a larger extent and acknowledging that communities are not only about reproductive labor, but it's also something else that I call citizenship. But Onofrio Romano is a philosopher from within the degrowth community, and he says that the same way that the capitalistic people are obsessed with productive labor, degrowthers are obsessed or alienated with reproductive labor. If you spend all of your time with the reproductive labor, you don't have any more time for the political activism, for the analysis, for the engagement in movement, for really pushing back against the structural processes, because it takes all day long. So how are you gonna go beyond the organization of the reproductive life just because you want to stay away from the market? That is no life. So the notion of depends goes beyond that. So I think this is something that we need to think and to promote of deeper reflection in the degrowth movement. And in that framing, what I think of degrowth is degrowth, a process happening in the global north, and the global south needs to go into a different process, which I call post-extractivism. Just for a lack of a better word, there are many proposals of a post something for the Global South, but we understand that what is happening in the Global South is related to an extraction that is also depleting our ecosystems and is related to this unequal exchange, but also the complicity of our very own elites and the harm that has been also expanded in our territory. So that's why I call it post-extractivism. So that there are these two parallel processes that in the end will take us to a moment, an utopic moment of post-growth. A moment after the economic system based on a growthism paradigm, either by collapse, I hope not, or by a planned strategy. And we will meet there, Global South and Global North. So I don't think that the growth needs to happen in the Global South as the main strategy. As I said, in the Global South, concentration of wealth needs to be growth and harmful sector needs to be growth. But that's not our main strategy as opposed to what needs to happen in the Global North. To me, the post-extractivism process that has been already stated by many traditions in the Global South is something that we need to keep close to our heart and not go again, as we have betrayed our movements, I have to say, because our social movements keep on telling us colonialism and imperialism, those are the main challenges for us. And we say, oh, development, oh, you mean human rights? And they keep on saying, no, colonialism and imperialism. So we have betrayed our movements. And this is about time that we go back to centering really the colonial and imperial dynamics. And these frameworks are very important as well for the Global North. First of all, I heard the growthers said, oh, we try to decolonize our imaginary. We want to decolonize ourselves. It's like, you are the colonizers. You don't decolonize yourself. You decolonize the South. You know what I mean? Stop it centering yourself in this discussion. You are colonizers. So what are the processes you have to undergo to decolonize the South, to stop the imperial dynamics in the South? Now, I'm not saying that there are not colonizing processes in the North, those that the Irish experience with the British, those, you have you have many examples. So those are also internal processes of colonization that have a historical debt that needs to be addressed somehow, not to leave those aside. But in parallel to colonialism, there is a larger imperial project, and that's where Ireland itself, which wants to present itself as a victim of colonialism, is now one of the most heavily tax havens criminals in the world. Is really depleting all of the finance in the Global South and extracting all of the funding that could be very well addressing public services, social protection floors, etc. So Ireland and many other countries, even Barcelona with the Catalonia citizens, they need to grapple, on the one hand, with the situation of coloniality that they have experienced in their own flesh, but at the same time, having an imperial project in Cuba, in Colombia, and in other areas. And so as citizens, what are you going to do? Taking a whole of responsibility of what your private sector, your government, your public policies are doing somewhere else. You cannot just say, I have my community in Barcelona, we are the most successful degrowth community in the world, because we don't buy it in the Global South. We won't buy it if you're saying that you're entrenching your community when you know that the imperial project is still happening. So this is really at the core of our demands. How is the degrowth community really understanding how the imperial dynamics are happening, and how are they articulating in every step of the way into trying to dismantle or at least confront them or resist them? And that's where I come to the Global South reflection, because the Global South, of course, has many experience at the micro level, and I have a problem with the pluriverse notion. I understand where it comes from, and I have a lot of respect, precisely because I have a lot of respect. I don't like to see it captured by the degrowth community in the sense that we're all the same, my community and the Zapatistas, because it's not. Because your community is not gonna come and face the armed government, the military of your country, the way the Zapatistas did. And the Zapatistas are in resistance the same way all of the experience at the community level are in resistance in the global south, as opposed to your comfort communities in the global north, where you're trying to reshape the buildings, or, it's not the same. So recognizing the position of resistance is very important, because they are human rights defenders and they have a different position and they are giving their life. And this is where I also come back to say, not necessarily to this community, but in general, it's time the global north puts the bodies. They disappeared, the blood, the people in jail. Why is it only us? Why is my people, the ones that need to be disappeared, tortured, putting their bodies, because they are the ones facing the extractive mega projects of your private sector, whilst you are retrenching in your community, cooking your own cucumbers. So it's really a desperation that we feel. We live in the sense of urgency in the global south, and we don't see that the Degrowth community is reacting, although we know it is the most informed movement of all of them. Because even as I said, the environmental movement is fragmented, it's just working in silos. They don't really have this link with the economic dynamics. Whereas the economic justice movement, even though they have a very good grasp of the macro dynamics, they really don't see the extent of the harm that the environmental movement and the ecological movement is warning. The degrowth movement is the one that has it all and has make it its pride to understand in this encompassing manner. So this link between the macro, for instance, the trade agreements, or also the tax, the illicit financial flows dimensions, I think it's more close to the debt analysis. But what about the technology dimensions that I know this year is going to be the conference on the Degrowth conference is going to be on that, and intellectual property discussion. But also, I want to say something before I stop. It's why there is another framework that, as feminists from the Global South, we have been working on this. I am hosting and chairing a collective process of generation of knowledge, in which we feminists from the Global South are taking a step back and saying what is missing. And what was missing was, as I said, this reclaiming of the notion of imperialism. And we went back to our roots and we said, the Latin American movement has always been anti-colonial, anti-imperial, the same way that has been in Asia and in Africa. And we have our thinkers telling us how to do this. So we went back to Samir Amin with the notion of delinking. And it so happened that we have been bringing the notion of delinking to our present time. What is delinking? Delinking from the imperial ties, delinking from the global division of labor, delinking from oppression. So according to Samir Amin, is also a way in which the Global South can step up and negotiate in better grounds its autonomy from the global ties, because we are in better shape territorially. And this is why delinking is so beautiful, because it seems like a macro strategy, but in the end, at the territorial level, is food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, industrial sovereignty, currency sovereignty. And now this makes sense to degrowthers, because this is the degrowther project. So degrowthers need to start to thinking precisely about how to engage with the imperialist project through a delinking strategy, and trying to map what are the points of entry I can tackle, and then seeing how we can, through this process of self-sufficiency, autonomy, and helping other groups in the Global South. So this is how we tie the local and the institutional and the macro in a manner that makes sense also for movements, because this food sovereignty movement is isolated from the health movement. But we know that, for instance, technology and intellectual property are the points of entry of food and health, because we are tied, because we cannot have the property rights, for instance, here in the Global South. And those are coming through trade agreements. So we go back close the loop again. So the linking is a project in which that I really want to invite you all. We are still in the process of developing this collective knowledge. This is not me talking about, I read a book by Samir. I mean, this is the reflection of a collective that is saying we are still in that path. And let me tell you why it's so important, this path. Because so far, as I said, we have been in resistance. And the moment any successful experience happens on the ground, it's going to be smashed by imperial project. Palestine is the best example of how the extent of the murderous drive of that imperial project. But we see that all the time in our territories. The mega projects come hand in hand with the industrial military industry complex. And it's not that the South is underdeveloped or has not developed because we don't know how to do it. It's because whenever there is a thriving resistance project, the imperial project comes and smashing it. And it can be through sanctions. We have a list of, I think it's 27 countries so far who are receiving sanctions now, all of them from the Global South. Not one single country of the Global North is under sanctions. The sanctions are legal, part of the legal framework of the UN, mostly coming from the Security Council. But there are also other measures such as unilateral coercive measures. And so those are elements that are also imposed usually by a Western elite, and then the others follow suit. So also mapping the unilateral coercive measures that are also smashing us. And if it's not that, then it's by coups, imposed the dictatorships, the murder of our leftist leader, progressive leaders, coming with a new privatization or mega project to the territory. So all of those local communities, for instance, in the experiences that we heard of in the last session by Ashish Kotari, all of those are in danger, not immediate danger, but tomorrow any company can say, I'm going to be doing a mega project. And so this is why resistance cannot be sustained without a bigger project, and that is the delinking project, and that is trying to also being aware of the risks and the criminality of the imperial project and getting ready. And that's also where the Global North comes more stronger than ever, because these are your decision makers. And so the information, the global articulation, the direct dialogue with different processes, it is all combined. And I am convinced that the final borders of the final frontier of the fight for the life in humanity is not going to happen in the Global North. It's going to happen in the Global South. It's not going to happen in the Global South. We have been fighting that. It's going to happen in the Global North, because you have the most preserved nature, resources, etc. So the final fight is going to happen there. But why wait until that final moment of collapse? This is the moment in which we as movements need to be together and have a more thorough strategy, understanding of what is coming to us, and not be deaf to what the social movements have been warning us all along. So I'm going to stop here. I know I just poured a bucket of ice water into all of you, but this is where I've been thinking of lately. Hope you join me in my anti-imperial struggle.
I did say unfiltered, Emilia, and I think we got it. I am so glad that Aya and I invited you today. I think everybody on this call and thousands of people more need to hear this. Look at all these claps. Yes, go Emilia. Fuck yeah. I'm blown away every time, Emilia. So much of what you say hits so hard and is something we just don't hear enough, and particularly in degrowth circles. And like you said, it is so it's kind of contradictory, right? Like you mentioned just at the beginning, having this global, more like ecological international lens, but when it comes to the economics and the social politics, not so much. I also feel like this is slowly, though, changing. However, there's a bit of a disconnect, and I feel like within the more popular or the more academic scene, obviously I'm generalizing, this is coming less slowly, but within the more activist, the more artistic streams of degrowth, at least I am starting to see a little bit more, thankfully, of incorporating anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, and macro-dynamic lenses within their strategies. Although it's not there yet, it's definitely nowhere near close. And you should have a keynote in Pontevedra, Emilia, in front of all the degrowthers at the conference. Emilia, I did have some.
They would be so mad at me.
Well, hey, maybe the IDN can organize a conference, and then if so, then 1000% you're getting a keynote. Emilia, I was wondering. I'm really glad you mentioned delinking, because that was a question I had for you, because we've talked about this before. But I'm wondering if maybe we can move towards something slightly more actionable, where, you know, quite a few of the folks in here are in the global north, in positions of privilege. What are some of the, and you've done quite a lot of work, particularly with the UAB online master's crew, on entry points for degrowthers in international arenas. I know we had like a whole 6 sessions, and there's a lot to cover. But in your opinion, do you have any advice for folks who find themselves in the imperial core on what entry points could make the most significant changes? Of course, I know it depends on context and maybe your national politics, etc. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts for the folks listening today.
Yeah, thank you. I think I've mentioned some, even for people who think that they're isolated, that they have a very small community, the anti-fascist work is key, especially we see in the rise of the right wing, and it's not a matter of elections only. It's really understanding how the community life has been eroded. And so I think people still think, even in the global north, their notion of citizenship is an individual one, very much linked to the capitalistic individual of consumerism, consuming the political party messaging and just deciding when I'm voting, and that's it. Whereas the community life is totally different. No, this is why also we're rejecting the notion of just developmentalism or human rights in the neoliberal sense. We want a notion, for instance, of human rights that really goes back to the core of collective rights. And it is a new revolution to think of collective rights in this world, because the larger impacts, for instance, of the ecological emergency are collective. So how are you going to address that through a notion of reparation that is not only, monetary or just trying to make amends with the harm done, but really through the notion of non-repetition? And then that is a macro agenda. How do you reform the global financial architecture to stop this type of harm really once and for all? So what I say is that this notion of collective rights is trying to engage in a community in a different manner, not only, as I said, through reproductive labor, but really in a bigger manner. So there are experiences on fighting fascism on the ground in Greece and in Spain. I can share the links if anybody's interested. But overall, I think that's a major point of entry. And the second is, there are really many movements globally on each topic you want. They are making the connection with the larger macro agenda and the decision making on where the harm is being done, anti-austerity, anti-IFIs, on tax justice, debt justice, trade justice, on the discussion or if you want a sector that you feel more close to, yes, the health movement has been very much involved in, for instance, since the discussion of the the hoarding of the vaccines, they are very much following a new health and vaccines treaty as of now. And the same way, many negotiations happen either in Brussels or in Geneva, in all sorts of discussions, and many citizens are mobilizing there. This is why I want to make a connection between the activist and the advocate movement, because the advocate seems, oh, those are very technical, they are trying to, they're buying into the institutions. But it is really important to bring these messages that the movements are giving into decision makers who are in a key moment that may be determined through their own ego. So I don't want to be in a bad press in the newspaper, or by belief, or by relating to their electorate. So I think there are many ways in which people can really start engaging, even starting with the points of entry that I feel most passionate about, but really trying to make the connection. To me, it's the delinking comes when it's like, are you making a connection with the Imperial Project? And then how is it that your own efforts are really trying to make this to fruition, even if it's in a small scale? But this has to be an articulate process, right? It's going to take us a bit more time. But I think it is a shame that the wasted efforts of movements can crumble very easily under the premise of the concentration of wealth or a mega project, etc. It can happen also in your territories, as it is happening. We are also knowing that the racial sacrifice zones are expanding in the global north as well, precisely because of this massive expansion of the growthism project. So I think it is time that we start engaging in a more collaborative manner.
Thank you, Emilia. Yeah, I know something that has stuck with me, and I hope you're happy to know that it comes from you, is this notion of collective action. And I know a lot of us talk about it and whatever, but for me, whenever I think of collective action, I think of you, because of just how often you mention it, because it's so important, right, for us to be working together. And that's why I really, really respect your work with the Campaign of Campaigns, right, trying to make bridges between such global mega macro agendas. Like, that's a monumental overtaking, and the more of us working together, because at the end of the day, so many of our struggles are united, they're connected, right, they're intersectional, and sharing our capacity among these different struggles is so crucial. Emilia, I have one question that I think you'll find quite interesting. And it's about the state. There's quite a few degrowthers that have talked about the state, both in the positive and a negative light. I feel like quite a few eco-anarchists have found a nice home within degrowth because it's so critical of the state, whether it be in the global north or the global south. And I also know of quite a few activists that have given up on the international arenas, right? Giving up on the United Nations, given up on the WTO, given up on the World Bank, because no matter how much we fight and try, and you know this better than probably anyone here, you spent decades in these international organizations, that we don't seem to be moving forward, right? Even with like what we thought was someone good, like Antonio Guterres, with his, what was it called? Our Common Agenda, right? Which is insane, right? But we don't know that, we don't see that, we're not in these spaces, etc. So my question to you is, what do you, because I know we talked about this and I know what you think about this, but I want everyone to think, what do you think about the state, and why is the state important within our struggle?
So thank you so much for reminding me about the Campaign of Campaigns, because we're also doing a lot of effort on activism, in trying to bring all of this brainy notions into something that can also be easily applied for a wider community. So the Campaign of Campaigns is generating different materials. One is the Rise Up series, which we have 4 episodes, animated videos, paying homage as well to real activists on the ground. The first one is on climate change. The second is on the social reproduction and the feminist agenda, what is called the care economy. The third is an anti-privatization video. And the fourth one is on centering the responsibility of the global north in destroying the world, basically. Degrowth in a more elegant manner. We also have plays on debt. We are now developing another one on technology and the perversion of the WTO, etc. So stay tuned for that. As of the state, let me tell you, I think the degrowthers are a bit confused because they say they don't like the state, but their proposals are the social protection floor and their public services, and and it's like, who do you think is gonna administer those and implement those? That's something that's called the state. So it's like it's like confusion, utter confusion. Because also by 2050, 80% of the population will be living in larger settlements, meaning cities. So the fantasy that we're all going to go back to rural settlements is not happening. So what are we going to do to those real trends? Also, the larger concentration of consumption and harmful production is coming from urban settlements. So what are we going to do about that? So all of those questions, we need to tackle them from exactly the framing, the comprehensive framing that degrowthers have that no other movement has. And so they need to start grappling with the challenges and that they have the framing and therefore they have a responsibility. So the other end is that I have two answers for you. One is that for the structural feminists, such as myself, not all of the traditional feminism are the same. So there are autonomous feminists and community feminists. They have other proposals. But for us, it is the state that has been reproducing and deepening inequalities through their policies that reproduce the sexual division of labor. And it has been like that for centuries. And now we have a third entity, which is the state, that can also be used to steer and to dismantle the sexual division of labor. So when the state is doing its proper job through a gender equality lens and a feminist lens, it is helping to build this reality in which it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man, you can have access to maternity leave, paternal leave, safe transportation, etc., in which you can have all of the options as a human being with all the potential. When the state disappears, the sexual division of labor comes more entrenched, and we saw what happened in the pandemic. The women's rights went back 20 years. Precisely because the sexual division of labor imposed itself. So that's a big question for the growthers who say, I don't believe in the state. What is then going to happen there? And the other answer for you is the third element from the Global South. When we are dealing with the imperial project, I don't know about the North, we wish the states in the global North would disappear. Let me tell you, that would make our lives so much easy, like really full-on anarchists in the global North. But in the South, we really need to detach ourselves from the imperial project. We need stronger states that are really delivering on our project on, again, food sovereignty, industrial sovereignty, currency sovereignty, because that's what we need to really detangle ourselves from the global North. If we are so locked with them, it's because they are bullied, they are threatened, they are captured by the global North. So we are trying to reclaim our states. The global South needs states to detach itself, to delink again from the global North. So there are many questions. Are these the states that we want to know? We are, again, it's an internal fight. It's a local fight and then the global fight. And we are trying to do that in the both of the terrains. But I think it's really important to recognize if your project is only at the community level, that is fine. And there's also the question of indigenous peoples who are nations. They are fighting against the state, but they do believe very much in a notion of a nation. So that is also another element to consider when we're thinking about a broader project. And there, again, the indigenous peoples is a macro agenda, upholding 80% of the biodiversity. There is a time in which we acknowledge their demands of sovereignty and self-determination, and we make space for them. as social movements and not just extract from them when we want and say, oh, I admire you so much, and then we leave them to die. So it's like, how are we going to be coherent with the solidarity in action that we want to engage with indigenous peoples when they want to meet us, where they want to meet us? That's another thing. But overall, the notions of state and nation, I think it's also very much depending on, are you aware of the imperial and colonial dynamics? And your answer will determine what is your position on this, and how are you engaging with those? Are you just saying, I don't want to look at it, or are you saying, I want to transform it?
Thank you, Emilia. And I think I was actually just talking about this with someone else. I think even though at heart I'd say I'm an anarchist, I very much agree with what you're saying, and I think we have to be quite practical and recognize the contexts that we're in and the dynamics that we're in. And I think we're seeing somewhat more of this, even though it still is coming with repression, right? Some of the recent movements in Western Africa, in Niger, in Mali, the recent election in Senegal, although we'll see how that turns out. The rising of de-dollarization and trying to limit some of the power and increasing some kind of multipolarity, I think is quite important. And I think this is a dynamic that degrowth ignores quite significantly and could use much more thought, research, and application on the geopolitics of what it means to degrow energy and resource consumption in a very geopolitically tied world. I feel like I have spoken enough.
Let me just say, emphasize this. It's so important that you mentioned Francophone Africa, because they have no currency sovereignty, and 80 for one African franc, 80 cents go to France just for the admin, and then just 20 remain in their countries. So I think it's very easy to be an anarchist in the global north when all of the money all of the value of your own money is being extracted, and you're living out of that extraction every day. So this is precisely why the Francophone activists are now very much engaged in a revolutionary process in engaging with the decision makers in trying to reclaim currency sovereignty, such as Ndogo San Basile and many others, which, by the way, are using MMT framings. And this is why they're actually teaching very valuable real life experiences of a theory that has been very important for the degrowth movement, but they are really applying it on the ground. So thank you so much for bringing that. And yes, I see that people is raising their hands in the chat. Sorry that I interrupt you.
No, you're good. All I was going to say, like, just to touch on that, it's absolutely insane that the CFA franc still exists and how publicly colonial it is. Anyways, I've spoken enough. I'd love to open up the space for anybody to ask a question. It looks like Paz was the first one. So Paz, please unmute yourself and go ahead. Others, you can write it in the chat or raise your hand, do your thing. Paz, do you want to ask or Pasiflora, do you want to ask your question?
Hi. I'm Cindy. My name is Cindy. I'm an activist in Colombia. And first of all, I want to thank Emilia for all her words and her knowledge, share and expand in this room. And some years ago, I was more let's say actualizada, updated with the degrowth movement, but now, like, I'm listening because I get to know that some issues have been incorporated, like, or at least is on the side, in the horizon, like geopolitics. That's very important. what I would like to say is like, I know that maybe all of us that are in this group have had the opportunity to get to know to a point of knowledge that that's also a privilege somehow. Yeah, because this doesn't happen in a in many places. Like you can just survive and you cannot even dare to acquire knowledge. And talking about anarchism, like in Colombia, in our territory, like we have been living in a total anarchism because we have been under a narco state. And this means that all the state, all the institutions, all what the state represents was co-opted by the mafias and still are co-opted by the mafias. So all these arrangements that people have done are being kind of an anarchist wall that was a consequence of anarcho state. Yeah, because like as a citizen in my city in Pereira, you don't want to get to know to the state, to the institutions, because you know that they are co-opted by the mafias. So better far away from you. Yeah, and this is something that sometimes in the movements or in the I don't know if specifically the degrowth or the climate justice, they have this in account. That, for instance, like participatory, collaborative processes are not always free. Like, for instance, in my place, some of the grassroots are afraid of being involved in participatory processes because in their places where they live, they have mafias and they are the ones that take decisions. So it's like being involved now in this era of participatory, collaborative things, like they are afraid of kind of participate because they are afraid that mafias are going to push them to give a biased answer or yeah, opinions about something. So I think the degrowth movement has a lot to do, like the way of supporting us, like in the territory could be supporting people to do autogestión, and I don't know this word in English, but like grassroots to just be self-sufficient, to operate their grassroots, and just to that their voices through a person, an activist that is the person that goes in danger, and that's a reality. Like most of our communities, they are afraid to talk because they there is mafia behind. So we are the ones that are just crazy enough to talk and to just kind of a escape from, not escape, but assume this danger. So this self-sufficiency would be very helpful. Another thing, and this I want to ask Emilia, what is her experience with the corporativism co-opting science? Because this is also happening. And there are some research groups that in my case, in my area, in the water area, water and sanitation, there are some kind of scientific groups that have been co-opting science and are producing articles in journals in order to justify like some decisions by stakeholders that take decisions. Like, for instance, the Agencia Española de Cooperación Internacional. Recently, this agency presented a manual on how to select technology for wastewater treatment. So I went to the presentation of this guide, this manual, and they sacked me from the meeting instantly because the main companies behind the presentation of this guide by AECID was Veolia, was Aqualia, was Sasir, that are multinationals or transnationals that are already doing projects in Colombia and in many spots of Latin America, and those are involved in cases of paramilitarism and killing of activists, environmental activists. So this is something that I want to ask, because for us, like activists, I see in the degrowth movement allies to challenge these these cooptations of science. I don't know how to say. Sorry. Yeah.
¿Me repites tu nombre?
Cindy.
Gracias, Cindy. Thank you so much for this. Just want to go very to some points of what you said. First of all, is that I would agree that it seems that we are all aware of the geopolitics and imperialist dynamics. And however, for instance, even one of the most important framings of the degrowth movement, which is donuts economics, have no analysis whatsoever on imperial dynamics and on the geopolitics happening. So this is why, to me, it's very disappointing to see so many efforts on the donuts economics without really making this connection. So it's just analyzing isolated experience one after the other without really understanding how these territories in the global north are surviving. So I totally agree. It's like we have the information where we're not making the connection. The other thing I wanted to say is definitely what you call corruption in the South is really organized crime. And I hear you live in Colombia, I live in Mexico, and we have that across our territories. And this is very important to know, because from the global north, they accuse our governments to say, oh, how are they going to manage themselves because they are so corrupt? It's not that they are corrupt. You have to check on the Mbeki report of 2016 in Africa about the illicit financial flows, all of the money that leaves out in an illicit manner. So of that, 65% of the money was being taken out from the Africa region to the global north, to large corporations on tax evasions and tax avoidance. 65% of the money, of the public money that left the territory, was going to corporations in the global north through tax evasions and tax avoidance. 35% of the money was leaving out for organized crime, many types of organized crime, and only 6% of coming out by ways of corruption. And so the real thieves, the real criminals, are those larger corporations that are really stealing everything in our territories. And they're going to those fancy cities like Dublin and London and New York and, in Switzerland, and etc. So it's really, we need also to start naming things, because the appearance of corruption, as you say, is present, but the major harm that is done in our territory is precisely due to these imperial ties, again, imposed to us, as you say, by the Spanish corporation, that even those who claim to be our allies are imposing again those privatization processes for their own benefit. So I definitely hear you, and I just want to invite people here to listen to Cindy and say we need to fight corporate capture that is everywhere in projects of health, water, sanitation, of food, in the food industry, etc. So corporate capture is, I think, one of the biggest threats that we have as of now, not only in specific sectors, but only over states and also of the United Nations. And we see last year, 2 years ago, we were fighting BlackRock capturing UN women. And so we've seen that, and the UNFCCC being captured by Coca-Cola. So it's something that as citizens, we need to be aware of. We cannot just think, oh, this is something that is not touching me. It is precisely when Degrowth says we want public services, we want the public delivery. Well, this is what is coming in the way. So what are we going to do about it? So thank you so much, Cindy, for bringing those important issues to the table.
Gracias, Cindy. Maybe Mavra or Beatrice, I think both of you had your hands up. Either one of you.
I think Mavra had her hand up first. She can go if she'd like.
Patrice, please, you can go first. I just have a knock on my door, so I'm just going to quickly go check what that's about, and I'll be right back.
First of all, thank you so much for your talk today and for speaking so frankly about the degrowth movement. As a Latina who is trying to understand how to navigate the growth with a view from the South, it was very inspiring and enlightening to hear you speak today. I have two questions. One is straightforward and the other one perhaps not so much. Oh, also before I speak, Cindy, is it Cindy? Pasiflora, thank you so much for sharing with us your experience and your views from Colombia. One thing that I find really important as well, and I'm based in England, and it is not often that I see people position themselves in that way, is an acknowledgement of the privilege that it is to be able to protest and to voice our concerns for this world. I mean, Latin America is where the most activists are killed in the world. So to voice our concerns and to do work like that, it is a privilege of the North, and that only emphasizes a lot of what Emilia said about degrowth not retrenching itself into communities, but taking the streets in a project against imperialism and colonialism. Anyway, but my first question is that if you had to suggest one book or reading for Latin Americans to reclaim our knowledge production and the history of our movements towards a post-extractivist economy, which one would it be? Yeah, and the other one is more of a general question. I was still formulating it, so maybe I can ask it later and I'll leave you with that sort of straightforward, but also not so much question. Thank you.
Gracias, Beatriz. And thank you so much for also standing in solidarity with Cindy. I wanted to say also that this is the best, Cindy is the best example on why we were talking about resistance in the South as opposed to the retrenching in the communities in the global North. It's not the same. So when the Degrowth says that this is a polar reverse, it's really not. We need to really make the difference and understanding the dire situation in which the global South is, that the urgency, the sense of urgency that we have in the South, and this is why we are appealing to everybody to have an active solidarity in the global North. And you're saying, Beatriz, one book. I mean, we all like Las Venas Abiertas de América Latina, no, de Galeano, but there are so many. But I would really say Samir Amin is great, not only from a Latin American tradition, but if you want Enrique Dussel and so many Quijano, there are so many authors in the Latin edition that are really working on that have been forever telling us this. And I would also recommend Corina Rodriguez from the feminist movement, really making these connections on the macro agenda and our analysis of a new world that is not just remaining in this economy. So just wanted to say, we are all part of a feminist tradition. We call ourselves feminists of rupture, not feminist of inclusion. We don't want to be included in a system that is extractive, that is harmful, that is exploitative, that reproduces inequality. So we're against any agenda of inclusion. We want to rupture and dismantle the system and think about how we want to do something else. This is the Latin American structural tradition, so you will find a lot of ideas from Corina Rodriguez.
Thank you so much. Is it Karina or Corina?
Corina.
Corina, okay. Thank you so much.
Hi,
Yes.
everyone. Yeah, should I go next? Firstly, apologies for taking this call in my bed, in my pajamas, but it's 11:30 in Pakistan, and I'm really tired, so I hope you don't mind. But yeah, again, Emilia, thank you so much. Really wonderful to hear from you. Last session was wonderful with Ashish, and you've brought a completely different take and flavor to everything. And especially, I thought it was really interesting that what you were saying about the pluriverse, because I had never even heard that term till last week. And then I was reading up on it, and I completely agree with you that maybe it's not so relevant. Kind of it's being co-opted by the global north in a way. But just something that you had said. So I'm Avra. I'm from Pakistan. I was born in the UK, but I've lived in Pakistan, and my parents were political asylum seekers. So a little bit of an interesting background in that way. And really you get like very attuned to like political socioeconomic injustice and what it means to be living in these borders and what the social north and the social like like the global north, global south, and then also the like colonialism is very much alive and well. So all of these things. But what I mean, I feel like I kind of happened upon degrowth maybe last year in a really real sense. Actually, no, maybe like during the pandemic. So I guess it's been a bit longer, maybe 2-3 years. But honestly, like I was kind of really unsure about what I wanted to do with my career and my life, and I was kind of getting towards more of like climate crisis, like renewable energy. So, but something always felt a bit missing. So I'm really committed to degrowth as an actual framework that could work. But I understand how difficult it is, and especially living and working in the global south, I just have a lot of anxiety around completely pivoting my life towards this, but I'm really committed at the same time. So I was just wondering what your advice, or if anyone else in this group is feeling that way, or if they've been through this, like, I mean, what advice, or like, how do you think I can kind of make more of a, and I asked this to Ashish as well, because from what I see, I'm in a lot of the conversations around the climate crisis and climate justice, and the clean decarbonization, but also rewilding and regeneration. But honestly, like everyone in Pakistan I talk to, there's like maybe like five people I've spoken to who even understand what degrowth is, and no one really seems interested. And from people I've spoken to, and it seems that people really don't feel like it can work. Like they don't really understand what the utility of something for the global south, especially Pakistan, would be, since we're struggling just surviving, right? So people feel that we need capitalism, we need growth to solve poverty, but of course we know that's not true. Capitalism makes poverty worse, not better. So anyways, like, so I'm feeling just like I feel like very committed, but I just feel like maybe I need a little bit of direction from people who've been doing this a bit longer, and what kind of advice you would have for me. Sorry
Thank
if
you,
I
Maverick.
just went on and on.
No. Thank you so much. I think I'm not the right person to give an answer to this. Maybe you can talk to Brototi Roy. She's had more experience on making these connections between degrowth for the global south. But to me, again, I think it depends on your notions. No, to me, degrowth is for the global north, for concentration of wealth in the global north and in the south, and for harmful sectors. So whatever your points of entry you have in the south, for either the growing concentration of wealth or harmful sectors through many means, right? Concentration of wealth could be through debts, through illicit financial flows, progressive taxation, etc. So trade, and there are so many ways, or even mega projects on the ground are really part of this capture that Cindy was mentioning, is very much related to concentration of wealth in the global south. But also in the sectors, again, you say you are involved in the climate agenda, so very much if it's mitigation, then you have the fossil fuels industry, etc. I just think that in the global south, this is a very good conversation, because we have a historical responsibility by the global north. Our global south needs to keep on providing energy to our people. So it's not like, oh, I'm gonna just remove all the subsidies here and we're gonna shy away from coal, etc. No, that's for the global north to do. for us, it's focusing on adaptation, on loss and damages and stuff. So it's, you have to map again the colonial history, and that's how we engage in a dialogue with our global colleagues. So I think that's a discussion. From my end, as I said, the major project for the South is post-extractivism, which I think you are already in a way engaged in. So it's just really going back to our roots, going back to what our movements are always saying, and not dismissing them, as I call it, not betraying them, and really being there for them, hold space for them, and maybe adding what the growth can give us is this, as I said at the beginning, the broader analysis of the value chain from the beginning to end, even to disposal, and that can enrich your activism in the South, because we also didn't have that as a focus, So I think it would be for you to arm the pieces, but I don't think that the efforts in the South should focus on degrowth. I think we should, again, focalize on fighting imperialism and, again, making the bigger connections. But there are things that degrowth can help us. And if you're tackling harmful sector, the textile industry, etc., it would be important to engage with people in the global north, because that's also where the headquarters are. So again, collective action, I think it's the most important thing in these efforts.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that, Emilia. But just one follow-up question. So I'm currently working for the UN, and I've been in the development sector for quite some time. And I'm also a journalist and a sociologist. And what I feel a bit problematic is that, everything, we're going with a development aid mindset, and like a framework and a push, which is obviously very top down, and then obviously very colonial. So, but like the development model we have is the West, right? And like, even if I see what's been happening in Pakistan, like if I see where Pakistan was like 20 years ago and what it is now, like I see like such a more capitalistic society, right? Because like the middle class is emerging. They want, obviously it feels like that is what people are aspiring towards, right? So my worry is that like we keep trying, like by the time we try to kind of catch up, because like the shared worldview or the values, like I feel like until like the global north and the global south can't come together and agree upon and kind of think about what development is, that we're kind of stuck. And so I have this idea where I want to produce some kind of knowledge product or a collection of essays by people like yourself and people in this group. If anyone's interested, please ping me, where I want to decouple the idea of that degrowth can't mean development, and really critically analyze what we have been brainwashed to think what development is, and bringing in degrowth and like regenerative practices, and really like kind of bringing a global south like a multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral perspective on that. So yeah, so I'm hoping to do that. I hope maybe I can get everyone's buy-in for that at some point. But do you think that there is a way that or do you think eventually, maybe unfortunately, when the climate crisis does start getting much worse, do you think that governments and and people in both of these hemispheres can start coming together and have a shared global value system or goal towards degrowth?
So I'm with you. There is no framework of development for the South, just because the system as it is it's meant for the South to never develop.
Yeah.
And the discourse of development is that they're imposing all of these false solutions that Lebo Hang was talking about very strongly on the first session. So we need to stop promoting development and any developmentalist framework, and even human rights when it's about conditionalities for the global south. As Cindy was saying, that the Spanish corporation was imposing conditionalities and therefore expanding the corporate capture and the water and sanitation agenda. So we definitely need to stop with the development agenda. And just wanted to remind people here that Oliver de Schofter, the human rights rapporteur, I think he's on poverty and human rights. He's now working on a project of his for the 2 years mandate that he has on post-growth. And so he wants to help advise the UN, because now we will go into negotiate the new global goals, because the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, were not met. They're not going to be met by 2030. So the UN is saying, so let's negotiate a new round of goals. So since the Millennium Development Goals didn't work, and now these ones didn't work, so let's bring a new package. And so Oliver is trying to say, if we keep on having the Sustainable Development Framework with the 3 pillars: economic growth, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability, if there is sustainable economic growth at the heart of the sustainable development, this will never happen. We cannot have a UN project in which one of the 3 pillars are economic growth. So then what are the alternatives? So Oliver started to do some dialogues, and let me tell you very sadly, that Global North actors and NGOs met with him and told him, we cannot promote the growth, we cannot talk about post-growth. And so now Oliver watered down his agenda to say beyond GDP, which is fine, don't get me wrong, but it's very disappointing that it was Global North actors who told him, we cannot abide, we cannot support these ideas, and therefore he had to water it down. So again, this community needs to step in and, reached out, and the UN is another space that has a major corporate capture, but at the heart, it's the only thing we have. It's the same of the state. Without the multilateral space by states, or without the states, what do we have? Corporations. That's all we have. So this is really what we want to reclaim those space and make it our own, without them allowing them to continue being undemocratic, patriarchal, fascist, etc., co-opted, etc. So it's up to us. But just Mabra, I wanted to say, get Jason Hickel's The Divide, in which he's talking about.
I read that. Yeah, I read that. Like Jason Hickel is like, kind of become a god of sorts. But just like very quickly, just on that, I just wanted to say on a personal level, because unfortunately we still live in a capitalistic society, I feel like, for my personal journey and feeling like now I call myself a degrowther and I'm very like vocal about my stance. It's so funny how I feel like my job security is at risk, because literally, like, even in the UN, like, it's treated like as a bad word, like, it's just like, it's quite funny how I feel very, and I'm glad to be meeting like-minded people in a community online, because my situation in my work and generally has become quite problematic in some ways, but which is fine. But it is sometimes it gives me a bit of anxiety, but it's okay. It's the small price to pay. But anyways, thank you so much. I'll let someone else ask their question. But thank you so much, Emilia. It was wonderful. Sorry, just one question. Who can you tell me the full name of Oliver?
The shooter.
And also, were you talking about Arundhati Roy, the writer and journalist? Or was that someone else?
Mm-mm.
You mentioned someone else's name in the beginning. Okay, anyways, I'll try to look it up.
Great.
Okay, great. Thanks.
We're almost out of time, but Boroka, you've been patiently waiting to ask your question. So if you can make it a tiny bit quick, that would be awesome. So go for it.
Hi. I don't even know if it's a question. First of all, thank you, Emilia. It's really, really nice to see you again. I am not part of any degrowth network. I came because I saw Emilia's name. And I was thinking that, well, we met in December and I kind of needed a little bit to hear again these ideas to remind myself. Well, I don't know, coming from the periphery of the global north, I also noticed, and thank you, Cindy, also for sharing something I probably haven't even imagined in my life. Like, these are perspectives like that don't really come into the conversations. And I also found myself in this group thinking that the only people who don't speak are actually the people from the global north. And it happens many times in uncomfortable situations. It's hard to speak. But I think also in December and previously already, I kind of decided, okay, I will put up with the fight. So let's do it. Yet I wanted maybe something it's not to victimize myself, not at all for that, but I wanted to maybe ask a little bit more about how the eroded community life can be tackled, because what I feel you might have maybe in some of your states something that is way more vibrant, and there is some collective level that doesn't exist so here. And I kind of think that, I don't know, a fairly still young person, I might not even know what that means. So when you say, and I come from a Hungarian community, deeply fascist to the roots, like from my very, very close family members, maybe. This is a normalized thing. So entering into this community, organizing them, it's first of all very hard, also emotionally, because mentioning words like colonialism or imperialism and coming with discourse to the people, I mean, the only thing that I managed to do that people believe I'm insane. I mean, I am insane for smaller things, you know, like speaking up for something much more easily understandable for most people. So in that sense, I don't know, this is something that I struggle with, not to mention that what you say, we are citizens, and collectively, I don't even see most of my co-citizens actually understanding that they are citizens alone, and even less collectively. So yeah, I think what is difficult in this situation, that many times, even though I don't think I am alone, it just feels like really fighting against something much bigger than me. So yeah, I came here to find some care in these very, very strong words and a little bit of reminder. And thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Baroka. And it's lovely to see you again. Miss you. And I would just say, I think this is why I always find it helpful to know that you can always do work at the local, at the mezzo, or at the macro level. So you can always find alliances. Maybe at the closed territory, you will not find them. Go find them at the mezzo level. Like, what are the institutions? What are the NGOs? Or what are the, the associations or cooperatives or whatever? If you cannot find them there, and then go to the larger group. Where is the movement on tax, on even the degrowth movement there are many, but you can find many of them. And that's why I think the most important thing is to find first a place in which you are acting collectively. I do not believe in the impact of individual actions. I think we are deceiving ourselves when we are in the face of a huge emergency. We need to find a collective. But also, let me tell you why it's important to find a collective, because we are all sick. We're all with a lot of illnesses and our fragilities and our vulnerabilities, and we're all terrified and so outraged and so horrified for what we see every day in the world. And just Palestine, again, this is my best example. We cannot even sleep when we are outraged. And so it is really about how to find collective solidarity, also to do collective care. It is really important that we're not isolated, that we're not swallowing this, that we are not paralyzed by fear, by impotence, by judgment of other people. We need to actively seek out a collective that will host us as we are, in our ideologies, in our beliefs, in our utopias, and we need to keep on building on that and believing from our very core. And when you're faltering and hesitant, someone else will uphold you. And so this is why I was saying all of the things that I've said is because of this feminist collective knowledge that we are really embarking. Everybody can generate this type of spaces. So I think don't stay alone, don't remain alone, try to seek out a space. And for the degrowth movement, I think it is a movement. I know people say, oh no, it's just a bunch of academics. I do want to believe it's a movement. So there are many points of entry that we can really start engaging more broadly and even globally. Even if each of us is having a point of entry of our own, we need to be together as of now. Sending you huge hugs.
Gracias, Emilia. I think, well, we've run out of time, but I wanted to let folks know that Aya and I have been so astonished by the positivity shared, the how many people have shown up, and the good feedback that we've gotten, that we will do our very best to continue the series, to share more with each other, to spend more convivial moments, and have more of these that have so far been really wonderful and also emotional conversations. And so again, thank you everybody for coming. We will be sending out some of the readings and books that were shared today, as well as the recording for this session that you're welcome to share with your friends or family. And I think a lot of people need to hear what was said today. So please do share if you have the opportunity. And if anyone here is going to the Degrowth conference in Pontevedra, you can catch Emilia and myself. I think it's the 19th that we're co-organizing a little evening session. So we'll tease you with that and catch us there. But again, thank you so much, everybody. And Emilia, I cannot thank you enough for your contributions today. Mil gracias.
Gracias, JP. Thank you so much, Aya. Get better. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Emilia.
Take care, everybody. Have a nice Thursday. Ciao, ciao. Wow, what an ending. Oh my God. Bueno, Emilia.
Thank
Gracias.
you.
Muchas gracias.
See you soon,
Abrazo.
Emilia. Ciao.
Ciao.
I suppose we can stop the recording?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God,